My name is Karl Herwerk. I'm a lecturer at the Center for Development and Environment and the Geography Institute. I'm basically I'm a non-human geographer, physical geography, geomorphology. My fields of research used to be soil erosion, soil and water conservation, sustainable land management. And I was mainly interested in applied research in Italy, a couple of years in Ethiopia, and also now in Switzerland. Stephan?
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephan Rist. I'm a professor of human geography working at the same institute and center as Karl. Our common ground is sustainability, sustainable development. I am more engaged in the socioeconomic and cultural perspective of human geography and its relation to sustainable development or sustainability. My main topic, my main interest is trying to see how we can reconnect the sustainability agenda with those aspects coming from the long tradition of critical theory, for those who are coming from the socioeconomic tradition of sciences, in order to make sure that sustainability is not only serving the environment, but also the emancipation of us human beings from all forms of coercion. So these are my main topics, and you will see how I try to bring in this perspective in this wonderful work we had throughout the last, I think, 12 years, together with Karl.
Okay, so I start with the presentation. First slide is, we will focus on a field course. Now, what you can see is this year's topic, so 2021, assessing food system sustainability. And this year it was Stephan, myself, and Simon Oberholzer who were conducting the course, but we have to mention also that in the last years, Hans-Peter Liniger was also heavily involved in setting up the course and in the methodological development. Here you can see some highlights, some photographs. Meeting farmers, you know, we are assessing food systems, sustainability in Bern, focusing slightly on the production side. So it's not the whole food system which we can analyze in detail. I have to say two more things. There is a detailed description, especially of the didactics of the course. Who is interested can say that or can inform Laura. So we will be happily distributing that. And there is also a video of a similar course, not this field course, but the same area, the same farmers in a master level. It's a 10 minutes video with English subtitles. So who is interested in that, we can also provide the link. We also have a compilation of methods, but this is in German. I think most of you would not benefit from that. Okay, so now, next slide, please, Stephan. Mm-hmm. This field course is part of a real-world lab. Frienisberg is the region which is close to Bern, and there is a cooperation in this real-world lab since 2005. If we are lucky, you can see on the top left, we have research projects who fund us PhD studies. In any case, we have a broad network of collaboration. This is research institutes, you see here too. You see the cantonal or regional soil conservation services, federal agencies of the environment and agriculture, farmers, contractor farmers. And if we have no money at all, we still have courses which we conduct every year in this area just to maintain the contact with the farmers and the agencies. So usually we have thesis, bachelor and master's thesis, and 3 courses which are part of this real world lab. And we'll focus now only on one, and this is the bachelor field course. Stephan, the next. Now, our focus is on transdisciplinary research, and also then we are interested in transdisciplinary teaching or learning. In short, if you have to deal with complex issues like sustainable development, food systems, things like that, this requires 2 things. One, from the science part, an interdisciplinary team which is then closely cooperating with practitioners. So that is our rough definition of transdisciplinarity. Transdisciplinary research is nothing else than knowledge production. You can press once more, Stephan.
Mm-hmm.
So transdisciplinary research to me is knowledge production and is social learning. You know, you have scientific or academic knowledge production, societal knowledge production, and transdisciplinarity means we do not delegate the communication, we do it by ourselves. That means directly and frequently communicating and collaborating with the practitioners. That means the borders between research and learning and implementation become fuzzy. So for me, transdisciplinary research is learning, and that's why it's very relevant for university teaching. It's a different type of teaching. We are not talking about transdisciplinary research now, but teaching. But we found it's very, very motivating to engage there. And you see here, Agora, this is the Greek ancient marketplace where the exchange between customers and traders took place directly. And so that is the symbol for knowledge production as well. And next slide, please. To plan the course, we have developed over the last years a number of guiding questions. I do not go through them now, but the main part is usually when we, the main point is usually when we design a course as lectures, we start thinking, what do we want to teach? What are the contents that we want to transfer to students? And here we ask the other way around. In Bern, in the geography department, it's a maximum of 10 or 20% of students remain in research. The rest goes out to practice, to other jobs, you know. So, of course, it's a course which trains researchers, but we ask the first question, what will students do after they finish their graduation? What will be typical situations in their jobs that they will have to master? And what will be the competences they need to master those situations? When I talk about competences, I'm talking about knowledge and professional skills and critical awareness, such as values and attitude and things like that. And then there come a number of other tools. I will quickly go into it. Stephan, the next, please. So following those guiding questions, I will later on give you an example. What is how do we define our course? And there is an important didactic tool. In English, it's called constructive alignment. In German, it's didactic coherence, which hits the nail much more on the head, as I think. You know, it's a tool which harmonizes setting the goals, the learning outcomes, with the corresponding learning activities and the corresponding assessments. I'm not going into detail now. Here on the slide, you can see what the questions are. This is one of the central tools which I'm using in many of my courses. Next, please. And here is a very brief description of that field course at on a bachelor level. We usually have an introductory lecture of 2 hours, which is 2-3 weeks before the course starts, so that people get on the same level. And then in the week after Easter, that's a holiday week, we have 4 days of field work, and on the Saturday, it's a half day of data analysis. Now here you find some keywords. What are typical situations for students in future? Collecting primary data sets, analyzing and presenting summaries, things like that. They need competences. They need to be able to apply the methods, assess the data quality, compile and illustrate the findings and things like that. And the learning activities, of course, field work, because this cannot be done in a lecture. So, and in the field work, there is experiential learning. That means students learn by doing. And we usually think of the assessment at the beginning of the course. For example, how can I later on assess whether or not student did the job well or so? We have 2 levels. One is formative. You know, we show them at the beginning of the field course all the methods. We do it together with them, then let them practice independently, and then we accompany them with intense coaching. So there is a very intense feedback. They are allowed to make mistakes. We correct them. They can ask any sort of question, which requires a lot of flexibility from our side. So there is a learning progress, which is very individual. That means there are groups who start from a different starting point, and it takes them a bit more time to come to the same level as other students. So we don't give marks. We just give individual feedbacks to the groups. And finally, there is a summative assessment where they write a report with marks, and there are rarely clearly false or correct interpretations, but only plausible argumentations. And so writing that report, they show if they have learned and reflected the contents of the job. And there is an evaluation, because the normal standard evaluation is one thing, but we want to know after the course, what did they really learn and why? Not only contents, but also skills or attitude, whatever, you know. And so they have a month of time to write the report, and in the report they have a chapter digesting the course. What did you really learn and why? And these are highly interesting responses to that question. If you ask immediately after the course, so what did you learn? And they write down something which is rather spontaneous. But with this reflection time, we get interesting insights how to improve the course, which we didn't get before with a standard format. Okay, next. Of course, we have a mixed method approach, qualitative and quantitative methods. Next, we have interview for the socioeconomic and cultural data. We have drillings and spate diagnosis for the biophysical data, and we have transect mapping. So it's a sort of triangulation of methods. And of course, on the bottom right, we have also data analysis. We give them half a day to show them how to analyze data, because without that, it would be very difficult for them to set up the report. So a mixed methods report, qualitative, quantitative, biophysical, and socioeconomic methods. That's the core of the course. There is a lot of knowledge also, but the main focus is learning and applying, mastering methods. Next, please. Now I come to the course structure by contents. Here you see a picture of the Frinisberg region, which is half an hour by public transport from Bern. So students can go there with public transport every day, so it doesn't cost anything, no overnight. If we bring it now to the level of the map, next please. The first is the sociocultural and economic data. The red flat you can see represents the farm area. So on that farm area, they do an interview with all sociocultural and economic indicators and variables and questions that you can think about. Next is the biophysical data. We have two levels. The first level is within the farm area, we select a smaller area where they do transect mapping. They do focus on soil erosion and water conservation as part of the natural resources management and protection. Further, they get for every farm 3 locations. One is forest or pasture, which represents a fairly undisturbed soils, let's say, then a meadow, and then a cropland. Next. And for each of those locations, they do previous. For each of these locations, they do 3 drillings and 1 spade diagnosis. Now, I don't go into detail, but it needs a tough program so that they have enough locations where they can really exercise the methods, and all students, all groups exercise all methods. But since they are limited, each group is limited 2 days on the biophysical, 2 days on the sociocultural and economic side, we have to limit somehow. So this is the concept, the methodological, multi-level methodological concept of the whole course. Now, next, I will come with the biophysical methods. It's 2 slides more, and then I will hand over to Stephan. You know, the point here is we do not want to focus on single methods. We want to have a very broad array of indicators and a broad array of methods that people apply. Those are so-called rough methods. So it's rather qualitative or semi-quantitative methods but showing a lot of different indicators. Now, we have 5 levels. The first level is the topography. They are mapping and observing slope shape, gradient, length, for example. We have the land use. We have the vegetation with vegetation height and cover. Then we have a lot of indicators on the soil surface, like cover, roughness, waterlogging, erosion features, and so on. And then we have finally the 5th story, or the 5th level, is the soil. So I think it's fairly systematic. They can easily deal with these stories without having a big previous knowledge about all those things. So in the soil, of course, everything that you can map or that you can observe without using the laboratory, like the horizons, structure, texture, bulk density, earthworms, things like that. Okay, so I finished my part. You know, this was the course in general. The biophysical side. Here you see some pictures of some of the methods. I don't go into detail now. Those methods are summarized in a compilation of methods, which we have been reworking every year. So even last year and this year, we have gradually adapted it to the bachelor level. Of course, if you do PhD research, you can go a bit more into depth, but for bachelor level, I think this compilation of field method in German, unfortunately, is fairly useful and proven. Okay, Stephan, now your turn with the sociocultural and economic methods.
Okay, so before I continue, as you have seen, the focus in this course is on the practical level, no? On how to assess, in the last part of the presentation, a soil, a field, and a farm within its wider environment or landscape. The modality of work you can see here in this picture. We have normally about 30 participants, so that means that we have between 5 to 6 working groups. So these groups are staying together throughout the whole course, and many times they meet outside the working hour, the formal working hours, and they can become friends if they are not already, as you can see in this picture. So I think that's a more social implication, which proved to be very fruitful also for enhancing the learning process we organize throughout this course. So now let's see what we have been doing in practice in order to assess the food system in which these 6 farms are integrated. When we talk of the food system, we use a concept that came out of a large research project of the R4D. Cannot go to details here, but it was a large interdisciplinary and international research project where we say, okay, how is a food system structured? And we came to the conclusion that we can structure a food system into 4 different components. The first most known component is what we call the operational subsystem or a value chain. You see it in the center of this graph. But then this is not existing for its own alone. This has a biophysical subsystem, which has to do with farms, with the landscape, with soils and so on, as we have been hearing so far. But then it's also forming part of a subsystem that we call the policy fields, which is the domain of definition of the general rules that are then shaping the value chains in concrete terms. And of course, policy is also then directly related to the implication this has in terms of positive or negative effects on the biophysical subsystems. Finally, the 4th subsystem that we look at is what we call information and services. So this relates to all kind of inputs, be it information, be it knowledge that flows and services that flows into the shaping of concrete value chains. So here you see also they are of course linked to the policy field, and through the value chain, the subsystem of information and services is also related to the impacts they are having directly or indirectly on the state of the biophysical subsystem. Okay, so when we say now the students have to assess the state of sustainability of the food system, then the starting point is to do that through interviews. So we give them some basic insights in the preparatory meeting for the field course that allows them to elaborate, to develop an interview guide that poses questions that allows to address in the perspective of the farmers, which are the main aspects to be considered when we talk of the value chains that they are engaged with concretely, sometimes in each farm quite differently. And then the students have to find out also how a certain value chain is then linked to the subsystem of policy fields, of information and services, and also from the point of view, try to get some information from the farmer and how his value chains are having positive or negative side effects on the biophysical subsystem. So this is the first step. Try to assess, to find out how the food system is organized, of which these farms are forming part. So you can see we go through the different components then, and then in the next step, the interview guide considers not only the knowledge about the main features of the food system, of the farmers, but it takes into account also that we have to not only know how the food system is shaped, but we have to know also with which type of intentions and values the farmers are shaping their food systems. So the interview guide must also allow to engage in a conversation that allows to uncover the principles of sustainability that each farm or farming family is taking into account. Then it must also give room to discuss about enabling and hindering practices for sustainability, once again, from the point of view of the farmers running the farms. And finally, the interview also tries to uncover some basic values that are shaping the human-nature relationship according to what the farmer feels, according to what the farmers try to consider and manage in their concrete farm strategies. So this is the second step. Once they have been conducting the interview, we process them. We process the interviews. They do it basically on their own, trying to apply not only knowledge that they gain through the courses, but through their study so far. So let's say how to carry out content analysis of an interview they learned in other lectures, but normally they have not been practicing it very much. So we give them some hints on how this can be done in a very hands-on way by using mind maps, as you can see here. The group trying to reconstruct the information they got about the food system of the farm on which they were working. When then the works are done by the different groups, they become quite insightful. They become a kind of experts on how to reconstruct and display and illustrate also the main features of food systems or the other tasks they are working at. That means that we present them by each group, and then the other group can engage in a peer discussion, trying to assess whether there is something lacking, or whether there is a contradiction, or whether there is a specific feature to be highlighted in one or another of the food systems that have been reconstructed. To the degree it's necessary, then we can add on this, but normally we see that this peer discussion between groups having the same tasks to fulfill already comes to a very high level of mutual learning of what was found by each group and how this resonates or differentiates from what other groups were finding. So here you can see we are not using very formalized ways of illustrating a food system. This must be done also in a rather creative way, because that allows then to communicate back to the farmers and to other interested people in a much more easier way than when we would use very formalized ways of illustrating or highlighting the main features here in for the case of the food system. Then I will not go to detail, but just to show you how we deal with this more complex question. What is the sustainability perception of a farmer here, of the family Tischer? So here you can see this is easy to reconstruct if you take into account the three dimensions: social, economic, and ecological aspects, which were highlighted as very important by the family that was participating in the interview. Through that we get quite good notion of what their understanding of sustainability is. Then we go to the next step and try to find out, now in their view, having a specific farm specific understanding of sustainability, what are enabling and hindering factors that are helping or impeding them to implement their own notions of sustainability. Here you can see also a concrete example. I will not go into the detail. When you have interest, we can see that in the discussion. And then finally, we come to the last point, and we ask ourselves now, behind this whole cascade of a specific value chain that is organized by a farm, their own notions of sustainability, the hindering and enabling factors they face in order to express their own notion of sustainability through their value chain, and the basic values that they are using for organizing this whole cascade. We can also try to get at least a tentative idea of what is the human nature relationship that these people are taking as a reference when they organize the other levels of farm management that we are looking at. So that's the end of the field work. When people have this information gathered, then they start doing the processing, the development of interpretation of the biophysical information and of the socioeconomic information they have been collecting. The starting point for this is that they have to define their own understanding of sustainability, because that's then the normative basis on which they can interpret the information they found, making the biophysical and the socioeconomic assessment of the different farms. So once they have been defining this, they have a good stance, they have a good ground for now trying to find out what is telling us what are telling us the results of the biophysical assessments they have been doing. You can see normally they come up with a kind of synthesis of all kinds of different indicators by using this colored table, where they try to pull together the different indicators and assess them through a color code on a continuum from completely unsustainable to highly sustainable, which is between red and green. So this is what is done in terms of the biophysical assessment. For the socioeconomic assessment, once again, they start with their own definition of sustainability. And from this point of view, they assess, they evaluate the main features of the food system, and also they assess the principles of sustainability of farm management, handling and enabling factors in the perspective of the farmers, and the basic values that are shaping human-nature relationships. So that gives them then the possibility to come up with sustainability assessment of the food system based on their own understanding of sustainability. So where does now fit the socioeconomic part, the biophysical part in this whole picture? You see that here in this small window here, this colored table, basically the information on the biophysical state of the food system, they get through the assessments they have been doing in the biophysical part of our course. So that's basically what we wanted to do with this course and share with you. As you might see, we have a different focus here. With the whole course, we go along a transdisciplinary process of learning, meaning to make a difference to this understanding of science that is well depicted in this nice cartoon by Karl.